All right, go ahead, Sandra.
Okay, so share.
With kindness, as a guest speaker, it is customary that I introduce myself. My name is Sandra Campbell, Ganawakiha Wata, Wakoho. English translation, Sandra Campbell, band member from Wahta Mohawk First Nation, people of the Flint and Wolf Clan. Since 1992, I have been actively employed in varied capacities in the Indigenous organizations as an Indigenous traditional counselor, specializing in supporting survivors of Indian residential day schools, the Sixties Scoop, houselessness, mental health, and other traumatic impacts of colonialism. I'm not a fluent Haudenosaunee speaker. My language skills are limited and broken. Presently, I'm entrenched in the Toronto Indigenous community, where I am an Indigenous traditional woman drummer, an artisan that sews regalia, pre-stoles, and the talent of many forms of beading techniques. I mentor alongside with the youth and enjoy sharing my gifts within the community in many venues. I'm a 60s Scoop survivor. I have been institutionalized through the child welfare system as a Crown ward, a recovering alcoholic of 24 years, a loving, caring mother with wonderful grandchildren. Since 2010, I have been working at Toronto Urban Native Ministry, known as TUNM, as their Indigenous Outreach Coordinator and Pastoral Care Worker. Besides working within administration duties and some fundraising campaigns, I've dedicated my time to helping survivors of residential schools, dealing with the legacy impacts of the system, people without housing, alongside with children and their families, and other vulnerable sectors within the Indigenous population. I'm a health and wellness advocate that respects all spiritual forms of spiritual expression, in addition to embracing worship with an Indigenous worldview perspective. Since 1992, I've devoted my time to serving and spiritual mentoring my community of Tkaronto and Wahta, involved with congregational work within the Diocese of Toronto as a guest public speaker to encourage through leaning into the justice-right relationship through the lens of an Indigenous family woman. I've actively participated through facilitating and encouragement of resiliency in various healing, sharing, teaching activities, women's traditional drumming circles, as a helper, youth and family mentoring programs, and the LGBTQTS+ awareness discussions, focusing on leaning into reconciliation of self and community building through storytelling and sharing traditional teachings, building common ground. Let me make myself clear. I am not an elder, but have grown into the role as a knowledge keeper and lifted up as an auntie in the community. I don't
Sorry,
claim
Sandra,
to know.
can you stop for a moment?
I am not an expert. I also don't offer forgiveness of.
Yes.
Your video window is very small. Can you click on the bottom right corner of that video window?
Oh, okay. Apologies. I'm so sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
Institutional
Just
harm
restart
done.
now. Thank you.
I only share my lived experiences and provide a platform through encouraging the Indigenous, especially First Nation voices not being heard. cuando ya no We acknowledge this is the land and sovereign territory of the Michi-Sajagik Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe Confederacy, who have lived here since time immemorial, who made treaties with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and aligned nations. We recognize the enduring leadership of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Indigenous peoples here in our community, many of whom have led and taught many of us about caring and sharing for one another, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally, throughout the trying times of the pandemic and the cycle of an epidemic of displacement in the city of Toronto, and the deaths of the houseless people. We recognize with respect the powerful ancestors who have gone before us and the brave spirits of those who are honored throughout this workshop. With honesty, as we prepare ourselves to meet our Creator, may your hands be cleansed, that they can create beautiful things with love. With great respect, may your eyes be cleansed, that you might see the signs and great wonders of the Creator's world. May your eyes be cleansed, that you bravely hear and see the truth. May your throat be cleansed, that you might speak rightly with loving kindness when words are needed. May your feet be cleansed, that you might take you where you are most needed to be through your journey on the pathway of life. May your heart be cleansed, that you might hear its message clearly with humility. May the people, while learning together, become mindful and receive the wisdom while they are in the sacred space, be washed and cleaned by the fragrant smoke of this stage. May that same smoke, while spiraling to the heavens, carry our petitions of truth to our Creator. Now that we are of one mind and unified as the people. With respect, Creator, we give you thanks for all you are and all you bring to us for our visit within creation. The peacemaker Jesus, with love, you have placed the Word in the center of the sacred workshop circle, as though which all of creation is related. You have shown us the way to live honestly, with generosity and compassionate lives. With humility, give us the strength and wisdom to truly lean into our spirituality while living together with respect and commitment through the action of reconciliation. As we bravely grow in your spirit, for you are our Creator, now and forever. Amen. I like to acknowledge that eastern direction, the direction where the sun rises and new beginnings start, as we're on our spiritual path. This is the direction where we first enter into. It is also a direction of love, also a direction of springtime, where that little robin comes out, and also when things starting to break through Mother Earth. And if I haven't mentioned anything, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. And then I like to acknowledge that southern direction as we're entering in it while we're continuing on in our spiritual path. This is a direction of summertime. This is also a direction for our youth that are full of energy. This is also a direction that while we're in action and working real hard, we're still continuing on our spiritual path. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. Then I like to acknowledge that western direction, the direction of the great mystery. There's no true words to describe it, but that is the direction that we walk out of. This is also a direction where our adults sit. And this is where we offer our petitions and our prayers to the spiritual realm. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. Then I'd like to acknowledge that northern direction, the direction where our elders sit with the long gray snowy hair. These are the ones that we present our tobacco ties to so we can get some good direction in our lives. This is also a time to acknowledge that when we're tired, we rest. When we're hungry, we eat. And it's also a time that when we come together as family or as in community to share stories and songs and teachings. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. And as we're continuing on in our spiritual path, I'd like to acknowledge our ancestors. These are the ones that went ahead of us. But when they were alive, they did a lot of good work. So we could have this good life today. They could be a grandma, a grandpa, an auntie, or an uncle, or a spiritual mentor, or someone that we hold in high esteem. And these are also where our spirit helpers are. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. And then I'd like to acknowledge Mother Earth. She's always there, always providing unconditionally. She provides us with all our clothing, all our food, and all our shelter. And this is a time to remember her and to acknowledge her and to take care of her as she takes care of us. And if I haven't mentioned anything or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. And as we enter into the center of balance, the center where we meet our Creator, the Creator at birth had given us a good mind to sing songs and praises with our brothers and sisters together. The Creator had known us at birth and knows our spirit name. And as we are in that center and we find our balance and our connection, and we pray and we sing and we offer our petitions. And if I'm not aware of it, or if I haven't mentioned it, I will acknowledge that now and say Jimikwich and now Agoa. Jimikwich, 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 Jimikwich. Ahau. Content warning. This workshop contains descriptions of the violence of Indian residential schools and the ongoing colonial harm towards the Indigenous houseless community from the Greater Toronto region. In good faith, please be mindful and respectful during discussion period and of the lived experiences that I've shared. In addition, all names have been changed to protect individuals' anonymity. Trauma-sensitive counseling can be accessed through the Indian Residential School Survivors and Family Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419, or the First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness Helpline at 1-855-242-3310 for Indigenous that are triggered. There are many teachings to be found about the sacred fire which are shared across Turtle Island. I will share briefly some of what I've been told from various elders while attending Trent University, teaching circles, and from the firekeepers. It is a spiritual doorway that opens to a spiritual realm so that individuals can communicate and have relations, and through our connections to the spirit, while the fire follows its original instructions. It is used to connect with our ancestors, the ones who had traveled ahead through the western doorway. The fire provides a special connection to that spirit world, whereby connecting our past, present, and future. Its presence gives comfort, a promise of peace with a better future. You may experience that there is an energy of that fire that is beyond the physical energy that manifests, that is all-consuming, filled with energy, and that needs to be respected, taken care of, to maintain its strength and remain strong. The sacred fire, alongside with tobacco, these basic teachings, is part of my truth sharing. With respect to the ones I've heard, the fire is the one of the beginnings of ceremony. An example would be by putting tobacco ties into the flames. The tobacco ties are our prayers, our connection to that spiritual realm, to our Creator, a gift from the Creator to connect through spirit while acknowledging our ancestors. Only sacred items or a community spirit food plate is placed by the fire to acknowledge our past relatives through our connection. There are very strict protocols in how to treat and respect how the fire is handled. For example, only the 4 medicines, the tobacco, sage, cedar, or sweetgrass, and a community spirit food plate can be placed into the fire or nearby. This is to express respect and honor with the act of releasing our feelings to the spiritual realm with the respected reverence. Fire also brings people together for warmth and protection while in community. We are able to gather and mourn or celebrate as a people. A sacred fire can be lit for many different ceremonies. Some examples are birthing ceremonies, or when we return to the spirit world, the opportunity to share and listen to storytelling, and for personal prayer when we smudge. And if I missed anything or haven't mentioned it, I will acknowledge that now.
I'd like to say hello. My name's Sandra Campbell, and I'm the social and pastoral care worker at Toronto Urban Native Ministry. We are urban. We found that Aboriginal population has exploded, and the young are starting to gravitate towards the city. So there's a definite need here.
So what I do is I provide, an opportunity for women to come, a safe environment where they can come and express their concerns while they're being integrated into the First Nation community of Toronto. So I bring in the hand drum because it is a part of our people, and it's universally accepted in First Nation communities. Even though I'm Mohawk and we use a water drum, I incorporate the hand drum, and that gets women involved. In the federal prison, Grand Valley Institute, and she originally came from Saskatchewan. And from there, she was released into the community, and she wanted to be integrated into the Toronto community, but she needed a starting place. So I was able to take her around into the community and introduce her. It gives her an opportunity for a safe place to talk, and I listen, and maybe provide some suggestions, and encourage her to continue with her conditions of her probation. She is one of our drummers, but she likes to come out to everything. And that's just that one individual, and she's a success story because it's been over 3 years and she has not reoffended. As I said, I provide a safe place for women to come to rejoice through crafts, beading, which I will teach women of the old way of how to do things. So it's a lot of hands-on. Honored that Faith with us, it takes the time to listen to the needs of the Toronto First Nation community. My name is Sandra Campbell. I come from Toronto Urban Native Ministry. During the pandemic, like everyone else, we weren't really prepared. We weren't informed of what directions to go. So the team, the staff, Reverend Lee Kerr and Reverend Evan Smith and myself went into deep prayer and tried to, in our prayer as a team, we found our calling. And we presented that to our board members. And based upon Andrew Bill Aspel's support of encouraging the ones that need to be out there, and that we'd be okay. The biggest challenge is about being accepted and feeling safe. A lot of it is trust issues. A lot of them don't feel comfortable going into a church. They don't feel comfortable asking for help to agencies, and when we try to refer them. So what we do is we give them that spiritual support, and we work with them and we sit with them so that they can get that help that they need. So what they're really looking for is that human connection, and that's where our soup and sandwich beverage, like our beverage soup and wagon, goes out on Saturdays. This is a new program that we thought there was a need, even though there's lunches being provided through the week. Because a lot of the individuals now with the encampments and dealing with the city park, giving them evictions, and they're being dispersed, and the numbers are high in the shelter system and also in the temporary hotels. They're forced to roam the streets and live in doorwells. and there's very limited resources for Saturday. And as the community is starting to open up, those programs are still not open, that the ones that really rely on it. So it's really important to do that deep listening and giving them that human contact so that they can feel human. And I believe that's what Christ wanted us to do as we walk out and give out the good news, is that connection. Water is life. Water is what sustains us. Water is what brings us into this world. And water is what helps us in this physical world. Water is life. The relationship between water and our health is the basic and directly affects all life. All life is dependent on this water. The waters is crucial for maintaining all life within this physical realm, and that our human body is mostly comprised of water, and that without hydration we would perish. We are made of water, and we need water to stay alive. The significance of water in terms of cleanliness and the purification of our physical and spiritual lives maintain and keep us healthy, as we are all spiritual beings. Our relationship with water and well-being is distinct, especially to the spiritual quality of water and to the significance of the Spirit in terms of creating and sustaining life. Since water is life, because water is spirit, and without spirit we have no life, whereby understanding of water as a spiritual energy is at the core of what life is as water carriers. All of these connections are manifested in the significant role that water plays in our practices related to pregnancy, birth, renewal, celebrations, and ceremonies, while the continuation of the life cycle of being and walking on Turtle Island. We were reminded daily about receiving help from Mother Earth and the connection from our grandmother. This connects us to our bodies, to our past, present, and the future. These circular connections of water, blood, the earth, community, past and future, is life-sustaining. The connection between the people and the water with the gifts of spirit, uplifting and healing, helps us to remember our relationship through connection, exchange, and caregiving, which define the type of bonding link that develops within the nurturing of the life-enforcing waters. Our interchangeable relationship and responsibility of taking care of water is extremely important. We've known for a long time that water is alive. Water can hear you. Water can sense what you're saying and what and how you are feeling. While near water, offer your prayers and place your tobacco down in this waters to respect and to acknowledge the respect towards our water. It's the same with our mother, the earth, and the water. Give it love as it follows its original instructions. Hamba, 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 ya. Hamba, hamba, ya. Hamba, 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 ya. Hamba, re, ya, we, ya. Ha, 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 yo. Ha, yo. We, ha, yo. Ha, yo. Hamba, re, ya, we, ya. Hamba, 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 ya. Hamba, hamba, ya. Hamba, hamba, Hambaya, Hambareya, Wea, Ha, ha, Hi-yo, Hi-yo, Way, Hi-yo, Hi-yo, Hambareya, Wea.
Okay, I'm sorry for the noise in the background. My granddaughter is getting ready for work. She's got to have clean clothes.
No issues. Zoom blocked it out for us. And thank you for placing us with those opening video clips. You want me to share your PowerPoint now?
Well, first, just give me about a minute. I just want to say, I didn't cop out. One, it's difficult for me to talk 1 hour straight. Because there's so much to share. And I'm very grateful and honored to be asked to do this workshop and to share this. This collection of videos briefly comprises the concept of the lived experiences of the Indigenous through their spiritual lens, personal lives, and to be rightly represented in the church and through the sacred fire circle. There is plenty of protocols and procedures and symbolizations within the Indigenous communities. Therefore, through kindness and respect, with attention, everything is important. Building trust through kindness and empathy to promote healing awareness through our gifts to empower ourselves and each other while connecting through diverse communities. This is what we call in the community, living and leaning into our responsibility. And you're more than welcome, Andrea, to start the presentation, the PowerPoint, because I'm going to be reading as that's going to be flipping through. So right here, it's the title. You can flip through to the next picture, and there I'll just start, and then Andrea's just going to gently massage us visually while I read. Genocide and the crisis of homelessness. Present day, authorities continue to criminalize Indigenous people for camping on their own territory. Settler society classifies whole ways of living in relationship with creation as illegal. People without access to private property and who live on the land are disempowered from their traditional life ways, self-sufficiency and self-determination, and building their own housing and labeled homeless. A leader from the houseless community comments on this dynamic. When we camp on the land, we share and are respectful. We take care of each other. We're a family. Security guards always come and kick us out. They say, "You've overstayed your welcome." I say back, "This is our land. This is native land." And they reply, "This is the Queen's land," and then call the cops on us and escort us off the premises. From the first, Canadian society has funded itself through extraction resource projects that have pushed Indigenous people into internal displacement, even on their homelands. Deforestation, I can't even pronounce it, sorry. Environmental destruction, ongoing occupation, and pollution have turned homelands into hostile, inhospitable, and police zones. Canadian government policies and seizures of Indigenous homelands have forced Indigenous people into confinement on small parcels of land known as reserves with some Indigenous communities without adequate housing and without clean drinking water. The lack of housing leads to mass crowding alongside with the increased risk of spreading disease and increased social disharmony. Such conditions have pushed many Indigenous individuals and families to migrate to urban centers. This creates misunderstandings through disharmony, leading to emotional clashes expressed even amongst their own community members, which overflows into the Indigenous urban settings. However, some people come in hopes of higher education, employment, or accessibility to healthcare. These opportunities to build lives while transitioning within their traditional homelands. This is called living off reserves. While the Canadian Constitution recognizes treaty rights of the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, settlers' policies undermine the effectiveness of these treaties, enacting continued colonial policy of forced displacement, genocide through corporate greed with unsafe practices towards the land. This brings legitimate concerns for the everyday Canadian citizen about who is managing this country. Is it the voted political party or corporations? Changes the dynamic structure of homelessness to houselessness. The Canadian Observatory on Homelessness recognizes the traumatic effects experienced by the houseless population imposed through entrenched structural systems of discrimination. Dominant understanding of property and poverty do not take into consideration traditional Indigenous lifeways and understanding of home. This narrow definition of homelessness is limited to the widely accepted four major categories of unsheltered, emergency shelter, temporary shelter, and at risk for homelessness, roaming the streets and doorwells, couch surfing, which is at odds with the Indigenous worldview and reenacts the legacies of genocidal practices that aim to implement institutional systems of assimilation. I'm going to shift you and turn you around on the ideas of homelessness and with an Indigenous perspective of defining houselessness. The Canadian Conservatory on Homelessness states the Indigenous definition of homelessness considers the traumas imposed on Indigenous people through colonialism, according to the definition of Indigenous homelessness in Canada. It is a human condition that describes the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit individuals, family, or communities lacking stable, permanent, appropriate housing, or the immediate prospects, means of ability to acquire such housing. Indigenous homelessness is not defined as lacking a structure of living. Rather, it is merely described and understood through a lens of Indigenous worldviews. This reverts back to treaty rights. The intent of treaty signing and the inherent rights from the Creator. The Indigenous ideals of way of life while following the original instructions. The concept of the Indigenous ideas of a home and the root of connections in relationship and connections to family and community and related to the interchangeable links to the land, animals, plant life. It is not a permanent building. Home is a web of interconnectional relationships to the land, families, and kinships that is beyond blood, but becomes spiritual through the intent of the ancestors. Governmental policies resulting through political policies, policies intended for all to alleviate the homelessness, pressured Indigenous people into the mainstream social services and the settler housing system. And in doing so, they criminalized the traditional lifeways and the houselessness and forced assimilation by separating the Indigenous from their sovereignty and self-determination, even on their own traditional homeland, defining any hopes of increased opportunities to an urban lifestyle, accessibility to the education, employment, health, and housing concerns. This results in alienating and exiling the original occupants of Turtle Island, and I'll narrow it down, right down to Toronto. The constructs, restraints, and the continuance of the genocide practices becoming offensively discriminatory and political, whereby harming for both Indigenous and settlers' relationships. But those who have leave those harmful conditions from the reserves find similar conditions within the city: a housing shortage, mass crowding in shelters, a limited amount of fragmented system of safe, self-determined housing, a lack of safe housing for the elderly and our survivors that experience confinement during institutions, a lack of running water and infestation and mold in public housing. The violence and systematic discrimination against Indigenous people is especially evident and currently shared publicly through various media platforms, through all levels of the institutional structures of the mainstream society. The housing population in crisis during the pandemic. During the pandemic, when institutional and grassroots services were mandated to close and eventually slow to resume or adapt their services to the new conditions. Some examples were the mental health services went online, cutting those without access to technology from their available supports. Prescriptions became difficult to fill in person. Access to critical information was only online. Medical programs closed, as well as many soup kitchens. The city forced the houseless population out of the tent encampments and into shelters and shelter hotels, breaking up the families and their support networks. These shelters lack services or trained staff to handle adequately the particular needs of the Indigenous people experiencing trauma, those who chose to remain in the tents as COVID-19 ravaged the shelters, even in the prisons and the jails, detention centers, were subjected to aggressive policing, criminalization, and arrest during this peak of the pandemic by the police. TUNM and other grassroots collectives sought creative and in-person ways to address these discriminatory policies and generated technical information exchange through accessibility by in-person and online within the Toronto Indigenous community. Another observation was that when shelter spaces were available, the environment and conditions of the shelter system forced people into crisis. Many survivors of genocide use substances to cope and manage the impact of ongoing flashbacks of PTSD. Sometimes they were even criminalized, reinforced back into the institutions. Frequent experience of sudden death of family and friends, and lack of self-determination over one's life and safety and privacy was subjected. A community leader and elder remarks on these challenges. In the shelters, you can't have visitors. You can't drink or use drugs. Everyone is going through problems, family problems, crises, too many frustrations. So they use the medicine to cope and get by, to have your rest. It eases the pain and frustration and relaxes you after a while. With no visitors, being cut off from our families, can only use the phone at certain times, we might as well be in jail. The shelters are run like a prison. We have so much anger about what we have been put through in these places, and some of us can't even speak about it to this day. It's just like going to residential school all over again. Every time I see a police horse coming down the street, I lose it. I'm right back to being taken away. I'm so scared every time I see them. I think to myself, they're coming for the natives. Community helpers with long-term built trust among the houseless were denied the access to connect with the individuals for our wellness checks. The strict policies of the shelter system penalized this houseless population, and experiences of quick withdrawal or admittance when conflict occurred. Examples of a person that became triggered and became in crisis or clashed with the staff would likely discharge them to the streets, pressure them to move to another shelter, or call the police. We have heard community members in distress refer to the shelter staff as the guards. The small confined quarters of a bunk can trigger memories of confinement in the basement of a residential school, or sedated and put in 4-point strings in their beds while in group home environments. Left alone while in crisis. Elders experiencing post-traumatic stress flashbacks while staying in a shelter had police teams called on them and were overwhelmed. Some of our community members who are survivors of childhood past of torture and detention have died in and outside of the shelters while they were forcibly discharged in the middle of the night. In TUNM, we have done many funerals for these brave souls who are now buried in unmarked graves in empty, barren fields located at the edges of the Greater Toronto area, often hours away from their relatives and unclaimed by their community and their families. How am I doing there, Andrea, on time?
You've got 7 minutes.
Okay, I'm close to the end. So I'm just going to quickly go through my notes here. I am reading them so I don't get sidetracked. We asked residents of the Trinity Square encampment to describe their thoughts and their experiences about the shelter and the temporary hotels. Stop criminalizing us. Stop with the empty promises, the housing lists, the city statistics, the head counting, the profiteering of our bodies. The housing crisis and the Indian residential school legacy still continues. Another commented, "We are still here and we take notice." Another one said, "The bodies of many that are unclaimed, that have died, murdered in the shelters, have been raped or beaten was common, and health complications have towered in the morgue. We have not been told of their deaths or where they are, and how can we grieve?" Another person said, "City parks, the department staff slash our tents and our equipment. And with fences being raised around the parks, we now sleep in the doorways." Another person said, we need subsidized or rent geared to income housing with Indigenous counselors with trauma sensitivity training. My heart is broken. I'm not about to educate a non-Indigenous counselor while I'm experiencing and living in my pain. You should see how they treat our Native women. I've seen security guards drag women by their hair. I've seen women being beaten up. It took everything from me to not lose it. The city housing workers are unreliable and they miss their appointments. And I'm treated as a number and not treated as a human being. The shelters and temporary hotels still remain crowded and unsafe because COVID is everywhere in the shelters. They are not serving our people. Safety and privacy issues are just one concern from some of the women. We live in fear of being evicted or kicked off the long-awaiting housing list. And in the shelter, I am attacked within from other residents that are non-Indigenous, teasing me, taunting me, and cornering me to fight with my fists. I am not a criminal, but it's like take a number, sit, shut up, and wait. We're tired of the police harassment that uses tactics to humiliate and intimidate us. Stop criminalizing us. We need respect through kindness. I have a right to self-determination, and don't shame me. I am not a number. These are tough things. I'm getting emotional. I've sat with individuals that shared these things. So I don't have much time. I've got like 2 or 3 pages, so I'm gonna condense it. So I'm just gonna pluck out certain things. Through resource sharing and information exchanges, we became informed about COVID and how to best serve the Indigenous houseless and the displaced population. Through pooling and sharing resources within collectives, grassroots organizations, newly established networks, and we were able to reshuffle resources within our congregations to meet and within the church to meet the needs of the high demand of the houseless region, and then to meet that need in the Greater Toronto area. This gave us an opportunity to concentrate and provide COVID education awareness while handing out the hand sanitizer and masks. With the knowledge that many of our community members have survived medical torture in the past and some have been abused in the Indian hospitals and cannot even enter an institution setting without being triggered. We were successful in advocating COVID testing to become available in a mobile setting. And we were the first barrier-free on-site testing in an encampment. And also, we brought in the vaccines into the community, fighting alongside the misconceptions of the media concerned about long-term care facilities. Alongside with the houseless community, we offered emotional peer support for individuals experiencing human rights violations and discrimination cases. We were able to have online television workshops in some, not all, correctional institutions, encouraged and coordinate combined efforts in the drumming and dancing outside of correctional institutions, in the parking lots, outside courthouses, on sidewalks, drumming and dancing from a distance, very loud. So prisoners, health patients, or community members, while we brought out various colors of fabric, flags, hanging up our red dresses or hanging in the trees. Paintings were displayed to be seen. You could hear us. You could see us. We take notice, letting them know that we are not alone, that we offer our tobacco down and loving prayer. Despite the families being broken up by the lack of affordable housing and in dangerously full and overcrowded shelter, the city continues to invest in policing of the houseless population. And that takes us into the bulldozing of people's homes and the criminalization of people living outside and the police raids on the encampments. For those we have loved and lost, we have our networks and organize a monthly Toronto Homeless Memorial. We support of a broader network within collective strengths and anchors us when we are reading out many names of the brave souls that have died during these difficult days. And during the aftermath, the work continues, even after the pandemic. With the shared leadership of people living on the land with their lived experiences, their voices are heard. We recognize and honor their leadership and exercise. In the encampments, there have been deep discussions along where we presented to Toronto Urban Native Ministry board members, shared in our collective in the downtown core area, sharing amongst the congregation of various congregations with reverends everywhere. We're all working, providing an emotional and cultural support network. I just want to quickly describe the logo of Toronto Urban Native Ministry. In there, in the wings, if you really get a close inspection, you'll see it looks like crosses, but actually it's people in unified, holding hands in that common ground. And as they're in that common ground, that's the right side of the wing. And on the left side of the wing, you'll see these pointed objects. And that's the city landscape. And as that city landscape, you'll start to see the land base. So I just like to point that out, and that ends my PowerPoint presentation.